He has spoken on the topics faith, family and freedom in Cuba, Belgium, Brazil, Congo, UK and all over the USA to crowds from 14 to 40,000. International leadership speaker, trainer and coach. Author of Learn to Raw Leadership, Attitude Hack, Live a More Excellent Life, 5 Battle Strategies of a Victorious Warrior. 2021 President's Lifetime Achievement Award recipient. Founding partner of the John Maxwell team. Toastmaster International Speech Competition semi-finalist. Founder of Tell It Like It Is TV, ThatGuyRocks.com and ThatGuySpeaks.com. Creator of Story Power TV, Transforming Grace TV, and Leading Leaders Podcast. Producer of 4 TV programs and podcasts for Liftable TV and World Trumpet Television as well as multiple social media channels. Please help me welcome J Loren Norris.
You know, I really am fascinated at the kind of leader who feels like, and I've been this kind of leader. In fact, I find myself slipping back into it from time to time. I let my frustration rise as a parent, as a leader, even when I was a firefighter. There were those times that I was in charge of the truck or the scene or whatever else, and my frustration would rise and it would take over my ability to lead people. And it wasn't intentional. It's just that my attitude was showing. And if you're not careful as a leader, if you're not intentional as a leader, you find yourself unintentionally destroying people while you're trying to lead them. And that's what I want to talk about in this episode of Leading Leaders. Subscribe now for our extensive video library of leadership lessons promoting faith, family, and freedom. I'm J Loren Norris with Leading Leaders Podcast, and I can tell you, because I've had to work on my own personality, my own leadership skills all of my life. I learned early on because I had both a stepdad and a mom who yelled constantly. They couldn't tell you to pick up your fork and eat your peas without raising their voice. And so I learned that early on, not just as an effective form of communication, so to speak, but I learned that the way you get things done, the way you get other people to get things done is to yell at them. And then, of course, I went right out of high school into the Air Force. And so between my parents and my football coaches and my drill instructors, it was just a continuum of the way you get results out of other people is to yell at them. And if you run into that person who is either really passive, really quiet, very subdued, and they don't respond when you raise your voice, then you raise your voice even more. You yell until you get a reaction out of them. And if that doesn't faze them because, I don't know, they're just quiet, or they absorb things like that and they don't respond to them, or they've got this really strong moral character and they're going to stand their ground no matter what, right, wrong, or otherwise, they're not moving. Some would call those a rebel, rebellious. But when you put those two things together, they're like oil and water. They don't mix well at all. And the challenge when you're the leader, and if you've always been able to command and control with an authoritative voice, to step up and add a little bit more to get things done, then you might find that you have a rotation of people, the people that you lead, because not everybody follows a leader like that. Now, I've seen leaders firsthand. I've done it myself. In fact, I was accused of browbeating one time. At the time, I didn't have any clue what it meant, but I have a better sense now of what browbeating is. And usually that's when you just can't let it go. If you get something stuck in your craw, something that an employee or a team member or somebody else has done, and you just keep harping on it. You keep going back to that thing, poking at it and pointing at it until you get them to confess, concede, or just cede to the ground and go, you know what, whatever, you're right. Now, usually that is a passive-aggressive form of response. They're not likely to actually change. Now, in fact, what will happen sometimes is they just suppress that frustration with you. They suppress that anger with you. The behavior doesn't really change. Their attitude about the behavior doesn't change. Their justification of the behavior doesn't change. Late for work, not turning paperwork in on time, not completing forms the way you wanted them to, not completing the online expectations. I remember working in a company where we were supposed to make 100 dials a day. 100 dials a day. And they had a call tracker. They had a log system tied to our computers and tied to our phones. And when we walked in the morning, it started at 0. And they knew that by noon we should be to 50. And by 5 o'clock we should be to 100. And if we were not, that was a demerit. Now, the funny thing to me, funny, not funny, haha, ironic, was that of all the people who were getting the bonus based on reaching the 100 dials a day, if you went 5 days in a row and you reached all 100 dials, you got a bonus check. That's pretty sweet. I mean, all you got to do is make 100 dials. But the bonus checks for making 100 dials were better incentive than the commission checks for actually closing a sale. And those of us who were actually making 40 and 50 calls, but we were having longer conversations, we were having genuine conversations, we were closing sales, we were getting contracts, we were turning in paper for the completion of the job. We weren't getting paid as well as the people who were selling nothing, but they were making 100 dials a day. And I thought to myself, as an employee, what a silly leadership system. What kind of system rewards you for doing what is not productive? It's just compliant. Now, I don't have to go too far for most people to understand that in the world of politics, in the world of business, in the world of big business, and when government and business merge together, compliance is more important than productivity. How do we know? Because we have people who sit at home and do absolutely nothing, or they're working remote. Yes, I use a lot of air quotes. They're working remote and they're getting a paycheck, but they're really not producing anything. They're not really being productive members of society or even of the organization they say they work for. And so the challenge with that is we're incentivizing behavior that is not productive behavior. That's a contrast to the leader who yells at everybody to get productivity to happen. But understand that it's really the lens at which you look at productivity through. This message is inspired by an encounter I had last week where I watched a leader upset with his team because some of them were late. Now, again, I grew up in a very disciplined home, disciplinarian, not disciplined, but disciplinarian home. I spent time in the military, and punctuality, that's a big deal. In my life, I like to be 15 minutes early to whatever it is. If I'm supposed to be there at 9 o'clock, I prefer to show up at 8:45 just in case there's a delay, but I'd rather be there when everybody else shows up than to get there after they're already there. I find that sometimes late is an excuse, sometimes late is lazy, sometimes late is fashionable, and sometimes it's a control feature. I watch people who show up late and they do it on purpose. And it's not fashionable. It's because they want to see who got there ahead of them. Like being late gives them some level of authority. It's a proof of status that you didn't have because you were compliant. You got there on time. But if you can reward compliance, then being there on time, that's really important. In fact, what this particular leader did was sent out a blast text message and berated everybody who was 2 minutes late. Now, granted, 2 minutes late meant you're supposed to be here at, let's say, 8 o'clock. Well, I was there at 7:40. The leader was there at 7:50. But everybody else was supposed to be there at 7:45 because 7:45 is the actual time he expected. 7:45 is the time he's trained them to be there. If 8 o'clock is the designated time, then 7:45 is the time that I should see your face. And so the ones that showed up between 7:50 when he got there and 8 o'clock when everybody was told to be there, he berated them, dehumanized them, demoralized them. You're stupid, you're lazy, I don't know what's wrong with you, you were supposed to be here at this time. And then he followed that list of attack of their personal character. Not their punctuality, their personality. He followed that attack of their personality with an incentive. well, technically a disincentive. They call that a negative reinforcement, a positive reinforcement. It's a negative benefit for a positive reinforcement to control the behavior. He said, for every minute you're late, meaning not 8 o'clock when I told you to be here, but 7:45, for every minute you're late, you owe me $10. I'll just take it out of your check. That adds up pretty fast. If you're only making a couple of $100 a day and you're 15 minutes late, you lost half your paycheck for the day. That's not good. That's not good at all. But see, it's not just the financial disincentive. It's the emotional, mental, human value that's beaten down. I don't know if you've done any psychological studies on workplace violence. Decades ago, it's been at least 15, maybe 20 years or more since the word postal became an adjective. He's going to go postal. And what they meant by that was the stress and the strain of the everyday monotony of the job, the meeting the demands of the job, that cycle of high stress and low activity, that repetitive cycle stressed people out apparently to a maximum. And in a season, there were multiple people who worked within the U.S. Postal Service who took various forms of weaponry into the workplace and committed workplace violence. In fact, if I remember right, it's kind of the earliest forms that we heard of significant workplace violence. Now, it's not new. It's not a brand new thing, but that was the season that it happened. And a lot of it had to do with that demoralizing, dehumanizing, lack of empathy, lack of emotional connection. And so when people found themselves stressed out, frustrated, they would often repress that. They would suppress that. They would press it down into their psyche until eventually it exploded like a volcano. We see these things happening in road rage. We see these happening in youth today who riot and rebel, and they get out in the streets and they do all kinds of malicious things from vandalism. In fact, there was a whole season, I guess it's been about a year ago now, what they called marauding teenagers. And they're all minors. They're all under the age of 17 or 18 years old. They started about the age of 14 years old. They jump on the hoods of people's cars. They break out windows. They set buildings ablaze. They turn over dumpsters and set the contents on fire. Just malicious behavior. No aim, no point, no end game, no goal, no stated, this is what I want in exchange for not doing this behavior. None of that. No, they just want to express themselves. And it's been conjectured that the kind of frustration that comes from being in a workplace where you're overwhelmed by the tyranny of the workplace, where you've got a boss who's always calling you names, making you feel less human because you didn't comply with what they wanted. You didn't fall into the compliance category, so you got the discipline category. You didn't do exactly what you're told, so you're demeaned. Well, this idea of the marauding teenagers, a lot of people say, well, they kind of feel the same way, but it's systemic racism. It's the society at large. It's not being able to express themselves the way they want to, whether it's in social media or in social gatherings face to face, because they had been repressed, put down, pushed under. They're like that ball that you try to hold in the bottom of the swimming pool, whether it's a beach ball or a basketball. The longer you hold it down, the harder it gets to hold down, and eventually it shoots up, but it doesn't just come to the surface. It will often fly way out of the top of the water. That's kind of the impression, sociologically, that we get of these marauding teenagers. But we see it happen in all types of events, political retaliations, lawfare. When people feel like they don't have a voice, they scream. In fact, Vivek Ramaswamy points it out. He said when people have a chance to speak up, they vent. They tell you what they think. And if you don't like it, then you can squash them again. But if they don't have a voice, then they speak up louder. And when they speak up louder and they begin to scream, when they're screaming and not being heard, then they turn to violence. And so that progression, that psychology, whatever you want to call it, that process is what we're talking about with road rage incidents, with school violence incidents, with workplace violence incidents, with riots in the streets. It's the result of either an actual oppression or a perceived oppression. And as leaders, we're responsible for understanding that the way, the tone, the word choice, the incentives or disincentives, all of those ways that we get people to comply, to perform, to produce within our organization, as leaders, we're kind of the last buck stops here people. We as leaders have to temper our own attitude. We've got to manage our own way of doing things, the words that we choose, the way that we speak, the mood that we carry. Because when that oppression begins with us and begins to seep into our organization, all of those other signs and symptoms, they don't go away. They're the natural reaction. If you put that basketball at the bottom of the swimming pool in the 3-foot end, or the 6-foot end, or the 12-foot diving end, or deeper, the deeper you push it down, the faster it comes up, and the further it will fly when it breaks the surface. I want you to take that basketball as the imagery of the emotion of your team. Maybe it's one. Maybe it's all of them. Vivek Ramaswamy built a $4 billion business and had to step away as a CEO because societal pressure created a town hall within his organization, and that town hall was that basketball under pressure. They wanted him to kowtow, to make some confessions that were not true of his belief system. And he said, I can't say those things with integrity. And they said, well, you'll say those things or we'll cancel you and destroy your company. So to save the company and the thousands of jobs of people that worked there and the impact the company was having in the culture, he stepped out. He let somebody else run the company to save the company for the sake of the people who were rebelling to telling him to go away. He wasn't oppressing them, but they'd been sold into the idea that they were victims. Now, see, this is a whole different set of problems. I listened to a great conversation with Jordan Peterson and Dr. Carol Swaim about the idea of this victim mentality. And Dr. Peterson made a very profound statement. He said, sometimes it's more powerful to be the victim's ally because you get all the benefits and all the leverage of being oppressed without actually being oppressed. You get to do all the things that basketball does when it comes up from the bottom of the pool, to behave in this way, to demonstrate outrage, to mock, to ridicule, to get revenge. Ibram Kendi. You get to do all of this stuff, but you never have to actually face the repressed. It's part of the reason that we see that Black Lives Matter was predominantly supported by middle-aged white college professors. Most of the African-American people or black people that I deal with on a daily basis were not huge supporters of Black Lives Matter as an organization. And the corruption and criminality that we began to see within the organization was a strong sign of that. That the people who were manipulating that label, manipulating that cause, manipulating that purpose, were not the actual oppressed people who should have been benefiting from its reality. They were the affiliates. They were the people adjacent to the problem. Now, as a leader, what does that mean to you? Well, it still means the same thing within your organization. Your attitude, the way you treat people, the way you speak to them. Do you oppress them? Do you demean them? Do you demoralize them? Do you dehumanize them? If you do those things, you are as guilty of holding the ball under the water as anybody else. Here's the big key. Because I'm speaking to leaders, what I'm telling you is when you recognize yourself doing that, you're the first one accountable. You're the first one who should turn the tide. You're the first one who should look in the mirror and go, I think if somebody said that to me, I would find that to be mean. I would find that to be demoralizing or dehumanizing. I probably shouldn't talk to other humans that way. I should speak to other humans with respect, to give them the dignity they deserve as humans. And if I do that, less of the basketball held under the water and more of an opportunity for an even playing field. Now, it doesn't mean that everybody that you lead is going to be rah, 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 go team, productive, beneficial, and not be lazy, non-compliant, unwilling to participate. Because there are plenty of people out there who just want an opportunity to take advantage. There really are. You know this. You've led them. You've met the people who, when you put them on your team, they begin the process as the second in charge of demoralizing your team and then blaming it on you. They demoralize your team and then say, well, I'm only doing what the boss told me to do. If that's not true, then they can break down a team faster than you can rebuild it. And if you're not wise as a leader, you get somebody like that on your team at whatever level, and you will find that they will destroy the team you've tried to build. And if you don't have the gumption to get rid of them, they will get rid of you. Now, the real question is, do you care about the people you lead more than you care about the results that you demand of them? It's a priorities question. If you prioritize people over productivity, then you treat people with respect. And the people that you respect, that you honor, that you treat with dignity, those people perform better. And that performance leads to greater productivity. But if you prioritize productivity over people, you just want results. You demand results right now. I want it this way. I want it this way only. Do it in my timeline. Do it my way. In fact, I don't care if what you're doing is wrong. It's not the way I wanted it, so do it differently. That kind of leadership, that's not productive. Now, you may think you're driving toward productivity, that you're all concerned about the bottom line, that your most concerned decisions are based on performance. And you might even say they're based on performance, and therefore that's meritocracy, and therefore I'm only striving to get the best results. But the minute that striving to get the best results destroys the human that's getting the results for you, you lose in the short run and the long run. As a leader, I want to challenge you. There are two principles. I mentioned them in the text of the details on this post. I hope you'll take note on these if you're just watching the video. Two people that threw out some great ideas to hold on to. Now, as you can see in the books behind me, I study leadership and psychology and communication skills perpetually. I never stop. I probably won't until I die. As long as I have the mental faculty to study, I will be constantly pursuing a better understanding of the stuff that I deliver to you, because I don't want to give you second-rate stuff. Jordan Peterson talks about that cluster B group of psychological disorders, the narcissism, the hysterias, the ways that people manipulate others and the reasons that they do it. But two principles driven by Maya Angelou and Dale Carnegie, they really stand out in this particular talk. Remember, what I said was good leaders correct without destroying. Good leaders don't demoralize, dehumanize, utterly destroy the character and persona of the people they're leading, even when the people they're leading are wrong. They're late for work, they're not performing, they're not complying with the policies and the rules, they're putting other people in danger, they're creating hostility in the workplace. Even when that's true, Maya Angelou said, they'll never forget what you told them. They'll never forget, or they may forget what you told them. They may forget what you did. They will never forget how you made them feel. And that how you made them feel, that's the basketball underwater. They may not express to you. They may not tell you out loud. They may sneak behind a corner and talk about you behind your back. They may send a text to HR or someone else. They may, just because you made them feel a certain way, and sometimes you have no control of how they feel, but how you force them to feel, the way that you talk to them, the way that you treat them, the way that you respect them and honor them or don't. That's the basketball underwater. I promise you it's coming back. It's coming up. Now, Dale Carnegie offers a solution to that. Dale Carnegie says, give a man a fine reputation to live up to, and he will. If you'll follow those two principles, by prioritizing people over productivity, understand they will never forget how you made them feel. And you will give people a fine reputation to live up to. You will find your team significantly more productive because you prioritize the people and not the productivity. People do what people see. If you treat them well, they'll treat you well. If you treat them well, they'll treat each other well. And a team that has great morale will have significantly better performance. That's just been proven over and over and over again. So if you're a leader and you find yourself as a leader correcting people with a bad attitude, and you're correcting them by demoralizing them, stop it. Just stop it. Look in the mirror and ask yourself, how would I feel if somebody talked to me the way I just talked to my team? And if you think to yourself, I wouldn't like that, well, then stop it. I'm J Loren Norris with Leading Leaders Podcast for Tell It Like It Is TV. Have a blessed day.
Loren is a master teacher on storytelling, and I learned so much. I'm really going to have to sit down and go back through everything, and I think I might have to have some more coffees with Loren, but it was totally worth my time, and I really highly recommend it if you're looking to grow your ministry, grow your business, grow your career. Loren will serve you well.
Thank you.